Tensions between Turkey and Israel flared anew today after an Israeli naval operation intercepted a Mediterranean flotilla bound for Gaza, during which 3 sitting Turkish members of parliament, MPs, were detained. In response, Turkey's parliamentary leadership issued a stark warning, signalling the possibility of escalating diplomatic confrontation. At the heart of the episode is Numan Kurtulmuş, the current Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, a position he has held since 7th June 2023. Kurtulmuş was re-elected to a further term in June 2025, securing 329 votes in the third round of a parliamentary vote. He is a senior figure in the ruling AK Party, Justice and Development Party. The flotilla in question is organised by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, FFC, an international network of pro-Palestinian activist groups focused on breaking Israel's naval blockade of Gaza by delivering humanitarian aid. Israel maintains a maritime blockade of Gaza, which it argues is necessary to prevent arms smuggling to Hamas. Critics, however, contend it constitutes collective punishment and impedes humanitarian access. Recent weeks have seen multiple confrontations between Israeli naval forces and flotilla missions. Earlier in October 2025, Israeli forces intercepted the so-called Global Sumud flotilla, detaining over 450 activists from around 40 vessels. Some of those detainees alleged harsh conditions, lack of medical care, and denial of basic rights, sparking backlash and protest in several countries. In the current incident, 9 vessels of the FFC were intercepted roughly 120 nautical miles off Gaza, and approximately 145 activists, including lawmakers, were detained. Israel confirmed the operation, saying the detainees were being processed with plans for deportation. Turkey swiftly condemned the action, labelling it an act of piracy and an illegal breach of international law. Meanwhile, Israel defended the interception, asserting both the legality of the blockade and the necessity of enforcing it in the context of ongoing conflict. Protests erupted across Istanbul, with thousands waving Turkish and Palestinian flags and chanting slogans such as "Long live hell for tyrants" and "Down with Israel." Turkey has announced that diplomatic and legal efforts are underway to secure the safe return of the detained MPs, warning that any harm to them would carry international repercussions. In a strongly worded statement, Speaker Kurtulmuş addressed the incident with urgency and clarity. They intercepted ships this morning. On one of these ships, there are 3 valuable friends who are members of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. 3 heroic friends. They restrained them as well. They detained them as well. He continued, "If a single hair is harmed on our friends who are members of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, you are the ones who will be held to account before the world public." Those words underscored the intense political pressure Turkey is applying. Kurtulmuş further emphasized that Ankara has initiated efforts for these friends to be brought to Turkey as soon as possible, signaling ongoing diplomatic maneuvers to repatriate the MPS. On the ground, the news triggered mass mobilization in Istanbul, where demonstrators braved autumn wind and tear gas to express outrage. The chants and banners sent a clear political message: wild anger, solidarity with Gaza, and condemnation of Israel's actions. Turkey's government, already facing diplomatic strain in the region, now has to navigate a delicate balance. On one hand, it must uphold its commitment to protecting Turkish nationals and parliamentarians abroad. On the other, it risks a sharp escalation with Israel in the realm of international diplomacy and public relations. This incident adds another volatile chapter to the ongoing crisis over Gaza and Israel's maritime restrictions. It also potentially marks a turning point in Turkish-Israeli relations. Once cautious partners, their ties have grown strained over years of Middle East gambits and ideological differences. The detention of MPs is particularly provocative, as it targets elected officials and thus cuts deeper than deterrence against typical protest groups or aid vessels. That calculus only intensifies the stakes. From an international law perspective, there is controversy over the legality of intercepting vessels in international waters. While Israel cites its right to enforce a naval blockade in a conflict zone, critics argue that such interceptions can violate freedoms of navigation and override humanitarian principles. Rights groups have intensified calls for independent investigation into these flotilla incidents. The incident also dovetails with the broader humanitarian crisis in Gaza. More than 67,000 Palestinians are reported to have died since Israel's 2023 military response to the Hamas attacks, according to Gaza health officials. AP News +5, The Guardian +5, Reuters +5. The blockade, restrictions on basic supplies and damage to infrastructure, especially hospitals and water systems, have intensified global demands for relief corridors and ceasefire measures. AP Turkey, already a vocal critic of Israel's Gaza policies, sees this event not just as a foreign policy flashpoint, but as a national test. Erdogan's government can be expected to push diplomatic channels, mobilize media campaigns, and potentially seek international backing from allies such as Qatar or Egypt. If the 3 Turkish MPs are not swiftly released and returned unharmed, Ankara's rhetoric suggests it may seek to escalate its response, whether via legal, diplomatic, or symbolic means. The world will be watching how far Turkey is willing to go and how Israel responds under international scrutiny.